Welcome to the Triple Win Leadership Podcast with Will Linssen, helping you to create better leaders, better teams, and better results with a 95% success rate confirmed by coworkers. In today's episode, we dive into the most important challenge that leaders are facing today, and that's leading teams better with AI. To explore this topic, we are joined by a highly recognized expert in this field, David de Cremer. Hey, David, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, Will, for having me. Very much looking forward to it.
First, I really like to talk about why this conversation today is so important, because in our rapidly changing world with all the AI becoming so much part of how teams work, how we collaborate, how we make decisions, leaders must not only harness that power of AI for themselves, but also must make sure that trust, transparency, and accountability remains clear throughout. And with that in mind, let me shortly introduce to you David de Cremer. He's one of the leading voices in leadership in the era of AI that we're currently living in, and a very renowned behavioral scientist. He has worked and taught at the world's top universities: Cambridge, UK, London Business School, the National University of Singapore, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, and Yale. And he also is the author of the AI-Savvy Leader book that is published by Harvard Business Press. That book is really a practical guide for executives who want to take back control of AI and use it to build trust, strengthen teams, and lead meaningful transformation. As I'm having this conversation with David, we also love to hear from you in how you use AI to help your teams to work better together, and what are the biggest challenges that you are working through as you're in this transformation yourself. So share your thoughts and experiences in the comments, and we'll get back to you there. Well, David, I think this is going to be a great conversation. What do you think? Shall we get started?
Yes, I'm eager to do so. Come on, Will.
Yes. All right. So, David, many leaders aren't struggling with AI per se, but they're really struggling with the fear, the resistance, and the uncertainty it creates inside their teams. So how can leaders kind of show up in a way to kind of build trust, bring people along, turn AI from something that people fear into something that people feel part of?
I think you're touching upon a very important point right away, is that when we talk about AI, everyone thinks AI is inevitable. It's all around and it's going to change everything. And that is a big, big message that companies have to learn to work with, and especially business leaders. You mentioned fear, uncertainties. Of course, if you say that something is inevitable, but people actually don't really understand it, anyone who says they're an AI expert are lying, because we don't understand AI completely. That introduces that kind of fear, that anxiety. And as a leader, and you know this better than anyone else, you have to deal with people's uncertainty. You have to give meaning to it. You have to put it in a context. So that's actually one of the main reasons why I started writing this book, The AI-Savvy Leader. And you mentioned that leaders, they probably know AI. Well, you would be surprised how many of the top leaders actually don't know AI. First of all, we have to start there. I called the book The AI-Savvy Leader for a reason, AI-savvy, because most business leaders that I've seen, and this is worldwide, across cultures, because we've created such a hype around artificial intelligence, and we can talk more about it, how it disrupts the market, what we can expect from it. But people are basically in awe for it, and that's where the uncertainty comes from. Most business leaders suffer from the same kind of awe. And I see this with boards who basically act out of a fear of missing out and are saying the biggest risk is not having AI. And they basically see AI as the strategy. It's almost like you have AI, so by default, you'll be competitive. Obviously, that's not how it works. It's not that AI has a direct effect on productivity, innovation, and efficiency. You need something to work with AI to produce those outcomes. And this is where a lot of leaders fail, because they're not AI savvy enough to understand the limitations of AI. They don't understand necessarily what the potential means to their company, because at the end of the day, what they have to look at is not at the next new best model, because an IT department will always go for the most shiny AI model, the latest one and the most expensive one. And business leaders, they say, okay, I'm not a tech person, I only approve the budget. And then AI runs with it and my people will be so much more productive. No, what they have to realize is that basically people are having to work with it. So it's about the resistance. How do you manage this? AI adoption is a change management problem. And that's where managing fears, managing uncertainties, managing expectations as well, setting clear norms, transparency, as you mentioned, transparent norms. Because our own research shows, for example, that although the company adopts AI, in many companies, employees are still afraid of saying, I'm using these and these tools to their supervisor, because they think my supervisor will think I'm lazy. I'm not really competent. I'm probably trying to make it easy for myself if I use AI. So there's still so many of those uncertainties also about the norms and the expectations in the relationship. And that is a big, big leadership challenge that leaders need to take care of. So in that sense, we arrive at the conclusion, adopting AI is not so much about the technology. If you want to be effective in leveraging AI, it's really more about the people and the culture. How do you deal with this? Removing first the resistance and then working on the skills that people need to have to go through change management and to work with AI in their new jobs that they're creating themselves, because they start integrating it in their workflow. I always say businesses talk too much about AI, but they should first start to look at where is the AI situated in the workflow? Where does the work get done? And who does the work, and adapt to these people and adapt to that workflow, and then decide on the models that you need.
Technological savviness of leaders has been a challenge in organizations for leaders for the last 20 plus years. I mean, the same questions and themes you're bringing up now for AI were the same questions and themes we were discussing on e-commerce and CRM and ERPs over the last decades. And that lagging skill, or that skill gap that leaders have in understanding AI is really not helping in teams and people inside the team being able to either use it properly, or having the permission to use it properly, or even having a decent conversation with their manager on how AI can be deployed, right?
Yes.
And part of why we're having this conversation today, ladies and gentlemen, is also you don't want to be that manager that people can't talk to because you don't understand AI, right? That's getting that grasp. Following on to what you just said, so in your experience, when leaders introduce AI, when do kind of trust and transparency kind of break down, and what are some practical steps that leaders can take to create confidence across the team in using AI?
Well, first of all, and I think you've mentioned the word already, it needs to be seen as meaningful. People need to understand why AI is there. The first response is always, and this is with any new technology, any new innovation that is incorporated in the jobs, is really, okay, why are we using AI? What's the purpose? I think you've probably noticed that if we look at the public debate around AI, it's very much shaped by people like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. So these are obviously tech people, and they're selling the AI models or chips or the infrastructure around it. So this is where this thing of inevitability, the hype comes from. So for people, this comes across as very overwhelming. So it needs to be meaningful to why is our company doing it? So this means, first of all, can you align it with the vision? And this is really it's something that the top needs to be part of. How does AI become part of the DNA of the company, basically? How do we see this? Why are we using it? And what kind of changes will this introduce? And then if you're a middle manager or lower in the hierarchy of the company, it really becomes important for people to see this in their job as well. So there's a few important tasks that you as a leader have to do, is leading by example, first of all. You can ask people to use AI, but if you don't use it, it's not credible. Trust is very low. Our own research shows this as well, that trust in the AI tool is actually mostly determined by understanding why the company adopts it and the trust in the organizational leadership, rather than just simply if the model is transparent, is explainable, is open source. The technical features actually play less of a role for people than the trust in their leaders. So there's no difference from change management before that as well, which is an interesting finding. Of course, the technological qualities help, but lead by example. And that doesn't mean you need to be the best in the team. A lot of managers still compete with teams when it comes down to new competencies, abilities, and because this is usually, I mean, most people, when they put in a leadership role, one day they were part of the team, and the day after they're leading the team. You don't just lose that comparison right away or being part of a team to show that you're the best in it. For you as a leader, you just need to show that you are endorsing this, that you are using this as well, and you give very simple examples. So AI-7 really, in that respect, means why do I use it? How do I use it? Which relates to governance across the company as well. It's ultimately the vision and the purpose is for your customers, for humans. It's not we want to have AI simply to have AI like most boards think, because it's not a strategy. It's an enabler. Making sure that it can enable and at the same time create these sandboxes in your team where people can experiment and fail. So this comes down to creating a certain safety where you can say like, look, we're going to fail in some of these steps anyway. But it's really interesting because it aligns very well with how large language models, for example, also work. They rely on human feedback. If you give a prompt, you get an output, you get content, you prompt again and you ask for some elaboration or clarification. That's also feedback. So you need to introduce these feedback cycles in your teams as well, where you can hear how are people doing, what is working, what is not working. And that's where the AI-7 comes in a very handy way, because AI-7 is really understanding the potential, the strengths and limitations of AI. So you can also see where basically this is what humans are good at. This is what the tool is good at. How do I bring those together? But that's a collective and participative learning process.
So it's good that you touch on this point, because when we're talking with leaders about this whole AI and how they work with their teams, the discussion kind of goes in a direction like this. As a leader, it's okay to know about AI and it's great to be knowledgeable about this. That's fantastic. Don't be the best in it, because that's already a lost game before you get started, because the people in your team, they have much more time to work on that. They should be the one who have the expertise in that. So the discussion is very much like, let's talk about the problem we're trying to solve together, that we articulate the problem well. Then tell me how you're going to take this forward, how you're going to interact with AI on this. What are some of the questions that you should be asking to AI or should have that conversation with AI? And then let's come back and let's have that conversation again and understand what are the various options we should entertaining, so that we make a decision together or we take the advice that you come with. So now you're kind of leading with questions. You're leading by framing problems better together. And then you kind of outsourcing a lot of that expertise and benchmarking and getting better ideas to the people in your team who are supposed to be smart, have more time, and should have better AI capabilities than you should want to have. And I think that's the direction leaders should think and work towards. Now, when I'm explaining this like this, then how does that make sense to you?
Well, it makes complete sense. And it's also what I experience in my own consultancy. So like you said, I mean, questions. Curiosity is an important skill in the AI era. Because if you I mean, this is how a large language model works as well. We still, humans, dictate the question. An AI doesn't come up with a question for you. You come up with the question. So you come up with the question, you get the response, which is content, and you edit and verify. So I always say the sequence is human, AI, human. That leads to the most innovative ideas. So unfortunately, we see a lot of people, our brain is lazy by default. So we see a lot of people who go to ChatGPT, for example, right away, without actually understanding the context and the structure of their own questions. So that's why critical thinking is so important as well in this. So asking these questions is very important. And I see this in companies all the time. And again, it's imposed quite often, AI. and also upon many of the leaders from the top of the company. So it definitely feels imposed by the teams. And I think it's really important to work on that sense of trust, meaning, vision. And that starts with a business question, actually. I always say AI adoption in companies starts with a business question. What do you want to use AI for? And you would be surprised how few leaders actually can answer that question. Oh, what I actually use AI for. So it starts there. And that's why I'm saying the meaning process is something that is also collective, as you said. You try to solve these problems yourself. So what is very important then is what I call flat communication and feedback. So we already referred to the skill of resilience. So if you have resilience, adaptable teams, if you can create that kind of culture, that leads to more of a learning culture then, because you're resilient, you can discuss failures, you can learn from failures, and AI learns in the same way. And if you do this collectively and you can manage that process with a certain level of AI savviness, like you said, not being the best person, but managing it that the right questions are being asked, and you see the bigger perspective of the business and your stakeholders, in whose interests are you actually using this, but also you understand your team, the jobs they're doing. And don't forget, jobs are tasks. An AI can do a task. It doesn't do a job. So where do you use then the AI and where not? That's going to be so extremely useful feedback for you as a team leader, where you can then really make decisions and say, this is how we're going to use AI based on our experiences, based on how we've learned. And this is where I don't want the AI to be used, because that's also a choice. It's not simply you bringing in AI and using it for everything. It's not a hammer. Some people look at AI as a hammer. And if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So for people who think AI is the strategy, AI can solve everything. No. In order to really leverage it, it's going to be a decision where to use it and where not to use it.
Yeah, and it's also, it's kind of shaping the conversation and shaping the decision making. But at the end of the day, there are still humans in the loop in making those decisions. Let's get to some examples that people get a little bit more concrete understanding. So can you share some real life examples how transparent communication about AI's limitations kind of help leaders to kind of overcome that resistance or fear in their organizations?
Yeah, so one example that I see, and it's a mistake that is commonly made across companies, is really when the company decides to embark on the AI journey, to say so. Usually you have a town hall meeting or a big meeting where most people will gather, and it will be the chief technology officer, the CTO, the CIO, the information officer, who will do the explanation. And usually what is the case is, what I see is, it's a very technical and a narrative and a talk focused on the technology itself. And so many times I hear after town halls like this that people leave, yeah, but what does this mean for me? Yeah, what about me? So it's really about, and you see this in your coaching as well, it's really about, again, why does the company decide to bring AI in? What is the narrative? How does it fit with the vision of the company? What does it mean for us? So it needs to be relational of tone as well. There needs to be a message, a story that you've also thought about it, what this means for companies in terms of the relationships between in the company. Because you can say we bring in AI, and usually companies say this for customer efficiency. We're going to be more efficient in terms of providing service to customers. What a lot of people forget is, if the AI comes in, it's not right away working. It's a change management process, which is a U curve. Takes some time. So if your people don't know how to work with it or resist it or don't understand the relevance of it, you will get pushback. And then at the same time, you've promised your customers already more efficient service, you have a problem. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm always saying the AI you use within your company needs to be integrated well before you actually can promise it to your customers. So that's why the external use of AI towards your stakeholders is always a tad behind the AI you use in your organization when employees have to adopt it, because there's a time lag. And you see, that requires a kind of what I call behavioral human-centered approach in terms of communication. It needs to be relevant to them. You need to have thought about the jobs that will disappear, the jobs that will arrive, the jobs that will be developed. That's another thing that I see with many companies. It's almost like, okay, AI is going to change everything. And it seems like most companies are waiting for a list to be published on, oh, these are the new jobs in the future. These jobs go. Well, that's a problem as well. Companies need to understand bringing in AI is not simply an add-on and just say like, okay, because what this leads to is what I see often in companies is you have different types of models and learning models used for different tasks. If you have more than 5 or 6, it becomes a problem because it's not consistent. Data management becomes a problem, and people don't understand anymore because you're simply adding on things. But it's about integrating. Where is the work situated? That's where you need to understand it. So this is basically where you have to focus on bringing the AI to people, and that means human-centered. And my human-centered approach is really not the idea of humans have to think like a computer and then they can work effectively with AI. It's really the design, the adoption, and the management of AI needs to be based on how humans work, because that will facilitate an integration. And that's behavioral human-centered approaches. So this is a problem that I see again in the communication of many companies. Another problem that we see in companies is also actually a common one in many decisions is that, again, it's a top-down decision. The board wants it, no time to lose. My competitors are doing it. The C-suite comes up with a plan. The top of the company is talking about it, but they're not doing it. And then ultimately the ones who are doing it are at the bottom. But before that information gets there, the meaning is lost. It's pilots that can be upscaled throughout the whole company. There's no consistency. And if there's no consistency in communication, no consistency in the norms and expectations that are built, and it's not really understood well what the company wants to achieve with it, you have a problem when it comes down to trust because it's inconsistent. And middle managers suffer because they get it from their teams and they get it from the top. So that is a problem that I see a lot in companies as well.
As you're listening or looking at this episode, if you found this a useful conversation, and please like this episode and subscribe to Triple Win Leadership Podcast so you don't miss the next future conversation that we're going to have on leaders and thinkers in the space of leadership and the future of leadership. And please share this episode also with people and friends and colleagues who want to lead better, build stronger teams, and use AI more effectively. David, I want to kind of turn that discussion a little bit towards kind of leadership behaviors, because you addressed a number of challenges that are very real in the whole AI adoption inside the organization. So give some specific advice or examples of leadership behaviors that are important to be effective in fostering that kind of innovation, collaboration, and adoption of AI by people in the team. What does the leader need to do?
It's an important question because, and it's also one of the reasons why I started writing this book, is with AI being inevitable, very quickly voices were there as well that AI will change leadership. So in a way, we would both be unemployed very quickly, because if the traditional leadership approaches, the leadership behaviors that we've observed in the past are not going to be there, what is going to be there? What will leadership be? Now, the interesting thing is that the way we just talked about it, basically that AI adoption is less about technology and engineering and more about managing people, expectations, cultural transformations in order to, first of all, remove resistance. Because from a technological point of view, leadership would be very transactional, because technology people think distrust, resistance will dissolve naturally. We both know that that doesn't happen. People resist. People that doesn't go away without any explanation. So that's why it becomes very important to install a culture based on AI, and why I said AI needs to be part of the DNA. And this is very much reflected in, and I wanted to share the statistics before I identified the leadership behaviors really, is I see this more and more happening today, is that there's two types of transformations happening in the AI era today. Most people, the companies will understand, okay, it's a change, it's transformation. What do? They lay off a lot of people. Then the board says, and now we need to do our second step, need to bring in AI. But that's a good thing because we fired all these people, so AI can do the job. And then it becomes painstakingly clear, and I see this in many companies, we have a problem because AI adoption to make it successful is not about having less people. Actually, the companies that are most successful in AI adoption, they even hire more people to make it work. Because like we said, it's about integrating. It's about bringing the AI where the work is, which is where people work. So that means leadership still has to do with people. The thing you have to do is what we said, visionary leadership. Can you bring this? Can you make it meaningful? That is something that any leader will need to do. So companies need to train themselves in being very clear about what the purpose of AI is. And this starts at the top. So the best companies that succeed, they have visionary leadership who put AI central in the mission and the vision and explain how it can help people. People first, machine second. Not the other way around, because else you get resistance by default and you don't get the right norms and cultures. So visionary leadership is important. Second is inclusive leadership. And we've learned about inclusive leadership very much in terms of diversity, DEI. These kind of streams have really emphasized inclusive, but inclusive is also, as we just discussed, how do you arrive at making use of AI tools in more effective ways for your teams? Well, by brainstorming together, by sharing information, but also by sharing failures. Which model worked, which model doesn't work, why, how, and as a leader bringing that information together and making collective decisions leading to collective learning. That's why that inclusiveness is so important, where people are participating. So in that sense, leaders need to train soft skills, the soft skills of collaboration, soft skills of building relationship, emotional intelligence, making sure your communication is the right tone, the right focus, the right narrative. And ideally, AI adoptions work only in terms of enhancing productivity, innovation, efficiency, if it's implemented across the entire organization in a consistent way. Because productivity, innovation, efficiency is an end product of an organization. So the whole organization needs to be going along. So the coordination and working less in silos is going to be extremely important. Now, these are things that are not different from the past, but we're applying them now in the context where an AI is available. So this begs for the next question. Is AI then going to be a team member, just like you are? And when we talk about AI agents. AI agents, technically the definition is an AI agent is what I call a closed loop. You basically have all the data and the goal is clear. So the agent has all the data in the organization, but it can learn above and beyond those data because it is clear in the goal that it needs to solve. But again, an AI agent does a task. So in that sense, one task is not a job. A job is much more than simply doing a number of tasks. You need to bring it together. You need to collaborate. So what you're going to see is AI agents, AI, in my view, from a human-centered point of view, and leaders need to emphasize this, is not the same team member, not the same status for a number of reasons. I've seen companies where they said employee of the month was an AI agent. Think about it. What does that mean? What does this signal? If you're working in that team, what it signals is like, oh, the AI is placed at the same level as me. So what does that mean then? If I use AI, do I get the same bonus if I'm successful? Or do I have to share it with AI, meaning that I actually get less? So you see, this is where leaders need to be very clear in their communication with respect to performance criteria, for example, as well. If you use AI, That doesn't mean you will be paid less. That doesn't mean you will have less opportunities for promotion. That needs to be communicated. That needs to become part of the culture. So in that sense, again, that is the kind of leadership where you lead by example, but also where you empower people, where you build trust so that they trust you in how you evaluate them. And then finally, it's also be important to be very humble. Humble leadership is also why? Because yes, AI models advance quickly. Yes, the organization will learn how to use it. And yes, you have to reinvent yourself just like the organization is going to reinvent itself. So you need to have an open mindset. You need to be willing to learn. So having a humble leader creates also a more humble climate, a more learning climate. So you see, today what actually the big thing is, there's a lot about cognition there in all these styles and in what we do. Because with AI, we fear that our brain is outsourced. But in a way, you can see, no, actually, our cognition becomes even more important because the way what you've learned, staying resilient, keep asking questions, be open-minded, and provide people the room and the space to learn. And those are important skills that you can work on yourself. But again, the leadership behavior is again very functional in terms of facilitating and creating the right conditions for people to learn, to adapt, to integrate, and to share information. And that's leaders create labs, sandboxes, and create those conditions to do this. And communication.
That's very insightful, David. Thanks for sharing that. So let's turn a little bit to things like accountability and decision making, because that's kind of the next thing that is connected to what you're all just mentioning about communication. So let's talk about that. How does accountability and decision making change when AI is becoming part of the play on the team level, on the team member level, and on the leader level?
Those are important questions, and people, especially when it comes down to, let's say, we all like innovation and creativity in organizations, but yeah, whose ideas are the ideas that are being put forward if humans work together with AI agents? And like I already mentioned, how are you going to be rewarded? Do you get the bonus? And those are things that people ask when they start integrating in the jobs and they see their jobs transform. So I think from a legal point of view, it's very clear. An AI is not accountable. So an organization also has to drive this, and this comes then down to governance. So when you put AI as part of your DNA's company, as part of your vision, the communication needs to come along as if you explain why you want to use AI, how do we want to use AI? How do we want to serve the interests of our stakeholders? That is an important communication responsibility of an organization. So let's talk a little bit about governance in that respect. So I think accountability translates itself at a few levels. Accountability in terms of rewards, but also accountability in terms of consequences and responsibilities. So that people, for example, that they realize and recognize the dangers of simply going out on an OpenAI ChatGPT or Claude or DeepSeek, whatever LLM, that you need to understand that what you put in these LLMs cannot be private data. So you have to protect always the customer. A lot of people don't realize that because this is how the AI learns. Again, this is where the AI-7 comes in, that you at least understand the process. That's also why more and more companies are choosing to design their own closed loop models, because it's just their data. But what I've noticed is that if companies don't succeed, their leadership doesn't succeed in really making their teams, employees trust the intentions of why AI is there and remove the fear, the resistance, they are also not always very willing to use the AI of the company because they feel they're going to be monitored. They're still going to lose their job. So the trust is essential in terms of governance, because if people don't use your large language models and they go outside of your company system and use the data in their job on public LLMs, you have a big problem. So that needs to be understood, and that needs to be explained, and there needs to be clear policies in the company about this. You also need to promote that kind of ethical thinking. Ethical thinking is really important because it makes that people have the stakeholders' interests in mind, and also where their responsibilities lie. So again, this starts with purpose. So why do we use AI, and who, and what is the reason that we want to use AI to promote service to who and safeguard their interests? So there's also a level of accountability. Again, that goes back to teams, leaders, employees, where they need to realize the way we use AI also is now today part of our organizational reputation. That needs to be made very clear. It mirrors it. And it is also very clear that that kind of thinking helps to decide which kind of models to use. A very simple example is the following. A lot of boards, people who are not very AI savvy, they're in awe for some of the, let's say, the demos that the big tech companies put out there. And in the demos, it's amazing what these models can do or a robot can do. But you have to think about it in the following ways, is that these demos are recorded within a lab setting where there's hardly any social noise. There's no stakeholders involved. It's optimized. Now, when you bring an AI model into an organization, your risk management goes up exponentially, because suddenly the interests of the stakeholders are there, which means you see the potential of an AI, but you have to translate it in a conservative way to some extent, because it becomes risk management, where you say like, okay, and then ethics and purpose becomes very important guidelines. Why is it again that we're using this? To maximize what? For who? And that tree diagram, that kind of ethical thinking needs to be part and modeled by leaders, but also you need to appoint champions in your company. Champions of governance, that people know where to go. Ethical AI champions, and don't suppress those voices, because again, this aligns very well with what we said earlier, the feedback loops, the sandboxes, where you learn by failing. You definitely need that transparency when it comes down to accountability, governance, and ethics. That is extremely important to have that mindset. So, so those are different levels of accountability you can see in terms of rewards, incentives, and responsibilities. You have to work at all of these levels.
At the same time, yeah.
At the same time, yeah.
Taking back control, that's the concept that you talk about in your book a lot. So what is your word of advice to leaders on taking back control in AI leadership?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize taking back control is not about command control leadership style. That's not what we're talking about. Taking back control is taking control of the narrative first of all. The narrative, like I said, which is dominated by the Magnificent Seven, very tech-oriented, people are drowning. They don't know what to do. So taking back control is first of all at that narrative level, and that aligns with being AI savvy. So you understand limitations, strengths, and potential. And that doesn't require you to code, because everything is now data-driven upwards. So it's AI codes for you. It's really about understanding basically what the limitations of AI are and what the uniqueness of our human intelligence is and how to bring those together. So I think that's that level of AI savviness. The second step is really understanding then what we already said. Leadership doesn't change that much. It now becomes leading your people and your organization in a way that AI can be integrated to help people and the organization grow. And I call this human AI-ization. So I put AI in the middle of the word humanity. AI as a catalysator of humans' growth. And the way I see this is it's all about augmentation and it's not necessarily about replacing. Yes, sometimes you automate with AI because especially when there's closed loop, meaning when all the data are known. Like for example, in a chess game, no human can beat AI in a chess game because there's a finite number of rules. So it's a closed loop. There you automate, but you automate with the idea to free up time so you can grow and perform better in what you're really good at. So when we say it frees up time to be creative, we believe, and it's still shown, humans can still think better out of the box because we live in the real world. And AI has no model of the world. It's numbers. We have a certain experience that leads us, that makes that we can be leaders because leaders have to anticipate. They have to deal with volatility. They have to deal with open systems. Whereas an AI performs best when all the information is known. So you don't want to lose that in your company by automating everything. So it's about augmenting. Where do you put AI in which tasks so that you can actually get better and grow human AI-ization in what you're really good at? And those are going to be the jobs of the future because people will reinvent themselves. And as a leader, you facilitate this. So what is it that leaders need to do in terms of their lifelong learning? Become AI savvy, stay updated about this. Very simple. Even an hour a day, go on LinkedIn, go on sites, read abstracts, connect points, but connect points with reference to what? Well, to your organizational purpose, the system you work with, and the structure you work with. Where is the work taking place in your organizations? So it's really leaders train themselves to be AI savvy that aligns with the organizational purpose, because that will prepare you to basically provide a context and facilitate your teams to start using AI for the right reasons. And if that happens, then the magic will happen. If you don't do this, it will be added on projects and you will be joining the 80 to 90% of companies today that are failing because they can't upscale the projects and there's no consistency across the organization.
Yeah, interesting. And I also liked that the word humane becomes now with a new spelling, right? Because it's basically you have to be more human, but also you have to be more AI. And the word humane and spelling with AI is telling people, yeah, you have to be more AI and more humane at the same time in order to really deal with that
Yes.
well. So
but the AI is there to develop, empower the human.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us in this episode of Triple Win Leadership Podcast, where we explore the critical theme of how to lead teams better with AI. And as David de Cremer shared, leading with AI requires us to rethink ourselves, me, how I function, but also foster trust and transparency with our teams, the we, and take back control, including solid governance in our organizations and our culture. And that's how that play will go in the months and years moving forward. As many are challenged by this topic, share this episode with a colleague or a friend who would benefit from thinking more deeply about AI and leadership for themselves, their teams, or for their organization. Reflecting on today's conversation, I leave you with this question. How will you take back control and lead AI adoption in a way that truly serves you, serves your team, and serves your business and the purpose of that business? So, David, tell us how can people connect with you, how they can learn about your work and about your books.
Thank you, Will. You can go to my website, www.daveDeCremer.com. Please connect on LinkedIn. Like I said, it's also a perfect platform for your lifelong learning. So the more we follow each other, the more we learn from each other. I publish regularly in the European Business Review, Harvard Business Review, California Management Review Insights. And from time to time, a book will be published. So please keep track of that and always open to connect and help out where needed.
Thank you very much, David, for being our guest today and having this insightful conversation. If you want more insights about this type of conversations, then turn on the notification bell so that you're alerted when the next Triple Win Leadership podcast goes live. So stay curious, stay responsible, and stay leading in the Triple Win to get better leaders, better teams, and better results. And look forward to see you on the next one. David, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Will, for having me. Thank you.